Now that we've learned how to use resource files, we can rely on a special naming convention to implement localized versions of strings that are specific to languages and cultures. So whether you realize it or not, your web browser is set to your preferred language and culture. By default, mine is set to English, United States. I know this because I can open up Internet Explorer, for example. Oh, let's bring this down over here. And if I go to Internet Options on the General tab under the Appearance section, there's a Languages button. If you click that, you can set your language preferences, and it borrows from my Windows setting, and I don't want to touch this, but you can see that the keyboard layout is US and it's English United States. Okay, great. So it's actually easier to change in other web browsers. Like, for example, I have Firefox here. And in Firefox, you can go to Options here. And then you go to, what was it? Content? Yeah. Languages, choose. And you can see that here I have changed and removed the English and the English United States to two different languages, Spanish, Mexico, and then if you don't have Spanish specifically for Mexico, then default to Spanish, okay? And I can add additional languages here and language cultures, but I'm not going to do that for now. This will actually come in handy because we'll run our application using both Internet Explorer and Firefox to see the difference that makes in our application. So let me just cancel out of that for the moment. Okay, so I've also written some code in our the index action method of our controller. You can see here that I'm just putting the user languages that we get from the HTTP request into a dynamic property called languages on my view bag. And then if we take a look at, let's go to the view, I'm just going to loop through and display all of those languages on the web page. So let's go ahead and just run the application. All right, you can see that the languages are ENUS and EN. We'll talk about this little part that comes after it in just a moment. Let me grab this URL, copy it, and paste it into Firefox, and you can see that I get that the languages are ES, MX, and then secondarily ES with a quality score of 0.5. Okay, so this semicolon Q equals 0.5 are called relative quality factors. It specifies what language the user would prefer on a scale of 0 to 1. And it was set in the HTTP 1.1 specification. So every language can be given associated quality value, which represents an estimate of the user's preference for which languages that they've specified in that range. So the quality defaults to 1, so this topmost item is 1. As you can see, the item below it is 0.5. So essentially what this means is that I would prefer the specific language and culture, Espanol in Mexico. However, if that's not available, then I'll take anything Espanol, okay? And the same would be then true for English as well. Let me shut that down, minimize that, okay? Okay, so what if I want to create specific resource files for different languages and language culture combinations? What I can do is pretty much what we learned about in the previous lesson. I'm going to select the project and then go to the project menu and select a new ASP.NET folder, and I'm going to add the app_global resources. Again, I promised that I would explain the difference between these two, and I will at the very end of this lesson, so just stick with me on that. All right, then in global resources, what I want to do is add 3 versions of the same file. Here, I'm going to call this first version localized strings. Let me copy that actually. And I'm going to click add, and this is I'm just going to keep the key of string 1, and I'll say this is from the default resource file, right? And so we'll save that. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing one more time. I'm going to add a new resource. Now, this is where I'm talking about a naming convention that's going to come into play. I'm going to use, first of all, just the language ES. So localizestrings.es.resx, click add. It'll give me string 1. This is from the Espanol resource file version of the resource. Okay. All right, and we'll save that, and then we'll do this one more time. Add a new item. This time we're going to specify .es-mx. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and click add. So I've given it both the language and the 2-letter culture specification for Mexico. So this is from the ESMX version of the resource file. Okay, save all that. And then I'm going to go ahead and close all of those down. Great. Now the next thing that I need to do in order to get this to work is to go into my web.config, and I'm going to need to add into the system.web section, set the globalization so that it kind of makes ASP.NET MVC aware that I want to sniff out what the cultures are, and then choose the correct resource file accordingly. So I'm going to need to set the UI culture equal to auto, and then the culture equal to auto. All right, we won't worry about exactly what those mean at the moment, but that should suffice. Make sure you add that. And then what we'll do is go into our into the index view, and I want to add some code here just to print out that that value. So I should be able to go resources dot localize strings dot string 1. See, IntelliSense doing us a favor here by telling us that we are on the right track. Great. Okay, so let's go ahead and build this first. And then let's run the application in Internet Explorer. And you can see that this is from the default resource file. Why is it giving me the default? Well, I didn't specify an English resource file, nor did I create an English US file. So it defaults to the only other resource file that it has, the whatever we named it there, the localizestrings.resx. That becomes the default. Okay. Now let's take a look at our Firefox version. This might be a little bit more interesting. In fact, I should just have to refresh this. And you can see that this is from the ESMX version of the resource file. Okay, great. Notice why it's using the ESMX version is because that was the preferred version that we set in our options when we went here. Now, what if we change this and move Spanish, just ES, as the preference, and while this is nonsensical, say, okay, and if you don't have Espanol, give me Espanol Mexico, okay? And not sensical, but we'll see that our application will comply. And you can see that this is from the Espanol version of the resource file. The ES is now the preferred version of the resource, and the ESMX is the second most preferred, okay? Great. So what happens if we come in from a completely different language? Let's go ahead and change it one more time and go to content, and we're just going to remove Spanish Mexico, and let's just add anything here. It doesn't really matter. Danish. All right. Click add and click OK. And now let's refresh the application one more time. And you can see that the language is Danish, and we're pulling from the default resource file, again, because it couldn't find a match for our localized strings resource file with a .da.resx file extension. Hopefully that all makes sense. All right, so very good. By using a naming convention, again, we can create localized versions of our error messages, of our labels for properties of our models, just for random strings to print out like we did here, and so on, just like we learned about in the previous lesson. All right, so I think there's one more thing we have to talk about, and that is the difference between this app_global resources folder and the other one, which is the app_local resources folder. So let's take a look at this. All right, app local resources is for creating a view by view, or in ASP.NET Web Forms, a page by page version of the resource file. So it's not global to the entire application, it's just on a page by page basis. And you might want to do this if you only want to localize certain pages, or if you're concerned that that global version of the localized strings is just getting super long with too many entries and it's too hard to manage. You could break everything out into its own local folder. So the way you use this is you go into, for example, our views home folder, and that's where you would put the localized folder. So I selected home. I'm going to go ahead and add an app local resources folder, and inside of that what we're going to do is actually add a new item, and we're going to call this about.resx. Okay, and here I'm going to put this as I don't know, what should we put here, from the about.resx file. Okay, very unoriginal, but I hope you get the idea. Save that. Now we want to add a second resource file. So let's go add a new item. And this time it's going to be about, because that's the name of the view that I'm going to use this specialized local resource for, about.yes.resx, and this is from about.yes.resx file. Okay, again, unoriginal, but that's not the point of all this. Okay, and here's where things get a little tricky again. In order to get this to work, let's turn off the webcam for a second here. What we're going to need to do is for each of these, we're going to need to change, like we did in the previous lesson, the custom tool. We're going to have to set that to public resx file code generator. Okay, and then I'm also going to need to give it a namespace. So localization example dot resources, I guess, would be fine. Sources. Okay, and then finally I need to change the content, the build action rather, from content to embedded resource. Let's save that. I need to do the exact same thing for the other one as well. So let's go paste in the custom tool. Great. Public resx file code generator. Now I'm going to type in localization example.resources. All right, and then I'm going to change this to embedded resource. Great. All right, and so far let's, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to build this just to make sure we don't have any errors just yet. Okay, great. Now what we want to do is go to our about view, which is pretty generic. There's really nothing in here just yet. And what I want to do is actually try to access those values. So I'm going to go at localization example dot resources dot about dot string one. See how that works? Beautiful. Okay, great. Okay, and so I think I've done everything I needed to do. Let's go ahead and build this. And I'm going to go back to that so you can see me again. And the next thing we're going to do is try to run this for the About page and see what we get. All right, so this one is from the about.resx file. Perfect. Now, the key here is to see what we get whenever we go here. Now remember that we've set the language to DA, so this is only going to be Danish, so we would expect it to pull from the default version. However, if we go back in here, we choose our languages again. Let's remove that one. Let's add Spanish, ES. That's probably the only one we need to add. Yeah, that's the only one we need to add. Okay, now let's, whoops, that's not quite right. What we need here is the about. All right, and so you can see it pulled from the about.resx file. Okay. All right, and just to prove that this works, because it looks like I was on the wrong page, I'll change it back just to prove that it will in fact work. So let's go back to content. Let's remove that and let's just add anything here. Let's go Dutch. Whoops. Let's go Dutch. Danish again. That's good too. All right. Save that. And now, since it's Danish, it'll pull from the default, the about.resx file. All right. Hopefully that's clear as mud, but that is how we introduce a very simple version of localization. Again, all of this only works if we don't require unit testing. If you do, you might have to change how this works. Plenty of resources online that'll explain it. And I just want to be clear about the difference between app local resources. This will be used on for specific files, so you put it in the same folder as the file itself that you want to utilize. And in this case, you want to make sure that you probably should make sure that it's named the same, just for confusion's sake. And then also the global resources will hold resource files for the entire application. Okay, if I didn't make that obvious before. All right, so I think that's all that I wanted to say about that. And let's continue on the next lesson. See you there. Thanks.